Well, I think it's cheaper than therapy for me. Well, in some ways, it's actually very expensive too. It's a lot of time and effort and emotional energy, but I don't know. It's the way I think just the way that I process with God, I guess, helps me. And maybe, and I will tell you that my books, I don't know, my goal is maybe not answer everybody's questions, certainly not. But if you just start asking, maybe if we just start asking some different questions, I'm okay with that being the end result of people reading my books too, is maybe just stir something up in you that opens up possibilities that you just hadn't thought of before. And um, yeah, that I think, at least for me, I would get stuck in my thinking and my traditions and I think I understand this or I think I understand that. And then I'd realize, and maybe it's just getting older, you realize, you know what? I don't know jack squat. I really don't know anything. I don't know anything about anything actually. And I only know because I only find answers when I go to the throne of God and say, you know what, I need mercy and grace to help in time of need. And I'm in that place a lot. So
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. My guest is here today, and if you ever need help with your tech, Wendy's there for you. She'll get there and she'll help you. She's an expert now on
Yep.
connecting everything. It's fun when you have technology. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works against you. And now Wendy is an expert. She's going to open a business and help you set up your microphones, all that fun stuff.
Do not call me for that. No.
No. Wendy is here on the podcast. We're going to be talking about her writings, her books, her stuff that she's working on. Get a great perspective from her point of view and how she approaches her writing and her topic. It's really exciting to have Wendy Jo Cerna on today. Wendy, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. We finally did it. We're here together. This is great.
We made it. Yay. I'm glad to be here, David.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience and getting set up today. I really appreciate it. Let everybody know where you are in this big world of ours.
Well, I live just outside of Seattle, Washington, in a town called Bellevue, which is just right across Lake Washington.
Nice.
They call it the East Side. I live on the East Side. Yeah.
There you go. Great. What's so exciting about that part of the world? What keeps you there? What would I want to come and see if I were to come out there for a visit?
Well, honestly, it's one of the most beautiful natural settings in the world.
There you go.
It truly is. You have the Puget Sound and some big, beautiful lakes, but there's there's Mount Rainier to the south. There's the Olympic Mountains to the west. There's the Cascade Mountains to the east.
Nice.
So every direction you turn, and then of course Canada to the north, which is beautiful. So any direction you turn, there's just lovely views. And you see, I grew up in Minnesota, which is about 6 months of winter, and here winter just never quite really arrives. I mean, we have 4 seasons, but it's not the frigid deep of the Midwest or parts of Canada, as I know. So it's refreshing to have green pretty much all year long.
Nice. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. How long ago did you move out there from Minnesota?
I came out in the early 80s and just
that's it.
Never went back. I mean, I go back to visit a lot, but this is my permanent residence. So
amazing. I love it. And then I guess Seattle's also known for coffee, right?
There is a large coffee brand that started here. Yes. And I am one of the, I don't know, maybe a coffee heathen in that I'm one of the few that doesn't drink coffee around here.
So this episode is not sponsored by coffee, just so you know. Not at all. Maybe sponsored by Mountains or Audio Tech. One of those things will be sponsored.
Please don't make me do that.
Let's move on, Dave. Move on from that. We're going to move. It's exciting to have you here. Let's talk about your author journey a little bit. Tell me, how did this all start for you? Like prior to being an author and deciding that this was one of the things that you were called to do and to be. What was leading up to that? Were you an avid reader? Were you excited about potentially being an author when you were younger? Tell me a little bit about how this came to be for you.
Yeah, well, books have always been a big part of my life. I come from sort of a family of educators, teachers, and administrators, and my mom is a bit of a wordsmith. She's a poet and an English teacher, so we got corrected in our grammar fairly frequently. But books were ubiquitous in the household. You were always reading for pleasure. Mostly, and I didn't know there was any other way to live. Like that's books were everywhere. So, but I never really thought about becoming an author so much. I just enjoyed reading. Um, and it's interesting. I married a man who is an entrepreneur, and he reads for information, but he never read for pleasure. And that was a revelation to me that someone wouldn't read for pleasure. Like I didn't know that didn't exist. So I always have enjoyed books a great deal, but the actual becoming an author didn't happen until much later in my life, after I'd raised three children and they start to leave the nest. And I think my youngest was maybe a senior in high school when I started asking, I wonder what I should fill my time with next because they are leaving me. So I was really struggling with that. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Washington in theater arts. So I love the arts. I love storytelling. I love the power of storytelling, of characters and life being portrayed. And somehow we as a race learn from other people's stories. I certainly have. So I loved the arts and theater, but wasn't super involved in it during all the years of raising kids. So I knew I kind of wanted to get back to my creative roots. I also have a master's degree in psychology that I got picked up along the way, and use that a lot of counseling sort of settings and group therapy sort of things. So being a lover of story and also being exposed to a lot of the brokenness of humanity and how our stories get interrupted by trauma and abuse and those kinds of things. And so putting people back together is also a passion of mine, I guess, to see people restored and made whole. So I said to the Lord as I was pondering what to do next, that I really wanted to get back to the creative part of me, but I also wanted to do creative things that were restorative and redemptive, that help people get back to their sense of wholeness. So that was it. That was my stated desire. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then one day, out of the blue, I heard very clearly in a voice that was not my own, strange as that may sound, mm-hmm. I heard there is a baby catcher gate in heaven, which is a very odd statement.
Not something that would normally just come to mind in everyday life. No.
I had never pondered the possibility of that before, yeah. Right? So I thought, well, that's very odd. So I said, well, Lord, what would you like me to do with that little tidbit of information? And very quickly, I also heard, write a book. And that was a little stunning to me as well. But I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I can. I never really thought of doing it, but I guess if the creator of all things is who I'm assuming I'm hearing it from, is telling me you can write a book, then perhaps I can do that. So then it was just a journey of actually sitting down and beginning to write a story that had to do with the baby catcher gate in heaven, which I knew nothing about. So wow. It was a bit of an adventure.
So what did the term mean to you initially, baby catcher gate? Like, what did you have a picture in your mind?
No,
what
nothing.
That meant?
It meant absolutely nothing to me.
Really?
So I actually went on Google. I'm like, what is a baby catcher? And I didn't know that midwives, OBGYNs, those who are in the business of delivering babies, that's the vernacular. They call themselves baby catchers. So, well, that's interesting. That's a little helpful. And then as far as the gate in heaven, the only thing I knew biblically is that I think it's in Revelation where John describes the new heaven and the new earth, and that there are 12 gates around the city of the heavenly Jerusalem. And so I know biblically that there's a precedence for gates in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
but I never thought of them as being sort of specifically geared towards one thing, like they have specific purposes. Never thought of that before, but I thought, well, I guess maybe they do have like we do have, gates in our lives and in our world that are designed for different things and different purposes. So, well, perhaps this is a very specific gate in heaven designed for babies.
Yeah, when I think of gates, I think of like a big mansion, and you drive up, and there's a little thing, you push a button, and they come over the speaker, and like, who are you? You have to tell them who you are, and then if you're allowed to come in, the gates automatically open, and there's a choir, and all that happens. But they're either meant to keep people out or to keep things in, right? That's kind of the idea.
Right.
From your perspective, as you were writing the book, was it more around keeping something in or keeping something out? Did you have that kind of thought?
Definitely a place of receiving.
Okay.
A place of entering into
Good.
The heavenlies. So it became, I got a little glimpse, at least in my mind's eye, of what that might look like, a gate where infants are received who have passed away, and what a special, tender and celebratory place it is on the other side of, that we live, I think, with a very thin veil between here and the next realm. And so the book sort of surrounds what I like to call thin places where you get a glimpse between the heavenly and the earthly. I think sometimes those thin places are particularly around places of life and death. If you've been in a room where someone is taking their last breaths, it's a thin place.
Yeah,
you can sense sort of one realm of life opening to another realm of life. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's a very thin place, a sacred place. And so I think in some of those places, if we're open to it, we can get a glimpse.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us can really define it. I know when my father was in hospice care through his cancer end of life journey, there was times when I would come in his room and he would tell me about who came to visit him that day, and they had long passed, long ago. But
Right.
He could recall conversations of them sitting beside his bed and the things they talked about. And it's like, I'd look at the nurses and they'd be like, nobody's been here today. Like, I don't know who, and you're like, well, it's the medicine, and you're like, well, what if there's something going on that we, in our educated minds, dismiss? Maybe there is something happening in that moment that brings comfort and peace to someone in that stage of life. And then going back to the more about your book, I just think of parents, and I've actually talked to a parent just recently on the podcast who lost their child very young, basically just after birth, and the emotions of a parent to go through all of that. And then it opens the door of, well, what's next then? Like, what did this life, why did we have this life for such a short time? What is the meaning of life? So I think that's kind of what I feel when I heard you talk about your book and that statement, just how that can turn into a book, right? And the fact that you weren't like planning this out for years, and you had an idea and you kind of came up with a title and you worked your way through it, and it just sort of fell on you. And it felt like almost like a download kind of feeling, I guess.
Yeah, it's someone was asking me recently, what does the process feel like when I'm writing? Like, do you see this all before you write? Do you visit these? I'm like, no, you know what? It's sort of a terrifying experience. And in that I sort of equate it to when you get to the edge of a cliff and you hear a voice that says, take a step. You think, well, that's not wise. No, thank you.
Yeah.
But when he says, no, I'll meet you there, then you take a step and suddenly there's like something solid underneath your feet and you just begin to walk on air, as it were. And it's a faith journey of saying, okay, I'm going to believe that when I put my pen to paper, something is going to flow out of my belly, as it were. But it's in a sacred sort of place where I meet with the divine and with the creator, and we co-create something together. So for me, writing a book, I have to continue to write because I don't know what's going to happen. If I want to find out what's going to happen, I need to continue to write. And so when I write, I don't write for 8 hours or 10 hours at a time. I get like maybe 2, max 3 hours at a time where ideas and story come to me, and then it just, like, I'm done. I got nothing else. And so I got to end for the day. And then I come back to the cliff the next day and go, okay, I hope there's something there next time I step off. And there is. And so it becomes a little less terrifying, but at the same time, it's a lot of faith and just continuing to believe that, yeah, he's going to meet me here. And he does.
It's kind of like putting the car in drive, and it has some momentum just by being in gear. Like you feel like you're in gear, and when you're not in gear, you're just either coasting or you're not moving. You're just sitting there. You could have the engine revving and all the noise of an engine, but you're not engaged. You're not.
Right.
So by writing, and by being in the process of writing, you've engaged that part of your journey so that you're available to be part of the process. I love that. Interesting. So as this is unfolding for you while you're writing, like it kind of feels like it's not about you in a sense. As the author, it's more about what you're writing, which is
very
unique.
Much feels, yeah,
because a lot of authors are about them in the process of writing.
Well, honestly, you only write from who you are to a great degree. So I think if the Lord had given that prompt, there's a baby catcher gate in heaven to you, for example, that maybe a very different story would have emerged. So I feel like for me, yes, it is about me and it's not about me, but I only can write from who I am. And so for me, the stuff that flows out is the stuff that I have filled my life with. And it's not autobiographical necessarily, although my last book maybe has a few more autobiographical elements in it than the others. But it just comes, like, for example, the baby catcher gate. We had been through a season a few years previously where we'd lost a niece of ours who was 18 years old and killed in a car accident.
Wow.
And she was very close to us and our children. And so it was a really stunning, gut-wrenching loss. And as I walked through that, I had never experienced grief like that before, where it's just here and gone and in one day, with so much life and potential within a person that's just gone all of a sudden. And so walking through that level of grief, I said to the Lord, okay, here's the deal. I believe in heaven, and I've always believed in heaven, but I need to now know about heaven. Like, I need something more to hang my hat on to find comfort than the level of understanding that I've had previously. So at least very much for that first year of walking through that loss, I really sat in that place of saying, show me more about heaven. And I didn't do it so I could write a book about it, certainly. I did it because I needed it.
Right.
And probably, I think it was about 7 years later is when he gave me the prompt of, to write a book about the baby catcher gate. And as I wrote it, a lot of the things I learned in that journey of walking through the valley of the shadow of death, they started to emerge in the story. Like, oh, I've actually, I don't know, visited these places, but I've sat in these places because I needed the comfort of them. And they became familiar to me. And so then I was able to write about things that I'm not sure I would have been able to write about had I not walked through that through the grief of it all. So
instantaneous grief is something no one can prepare for, I don't think. Right? It's not like You just go about your day, everything's normal, and then something happens. And it's like you said, gut wrenching. It's something that just puts you off, and nothing else matters in that moment. And I find it hard to find comfort in that moment because no one knows what to do.
No, no, there is no comfort in the moment that I know of.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just recently lost my son's best friend was killed in a motorcycle accident just a few months ago, 32 years old. And all those same feelings of, I have nowhere to put this. Like it's like everything within you short circuits, and you're just completely put on pause for a while, and the rug is pulled out from under your feet. And like you say, nothing else in life matters, except trying to sort through this stunning, gut-wrenching loss. And so it is a very difficult thing. But you know what it does? It forces you to think about things that you don't think about in everyday life. Like you have to go there because you got to find your way out of this sort of deep, dark hole.
Yeah.
And so you have to cling to things like, what do I really believe? And do I grieve like those who have no hope, or do I grieve like one who has hope? And where does hope lie? And how do I find it? And how do I give it? I do remember in losing my niece, my kids were all high school age and younger at the time. And I thought, I have nothing to give them. Like, I am so completely in shock.
Yeah.
I don't even know I don't know what to say. Wrap your arms around him, but there's like, I got no explanation for that. I got nothing.
Yeah.
And that was hard too, to think, okay, I'm supposed to be a comforter, and I got no comfort my own. So it's humbling.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're writing your book and not knowing the end of the book while you're writing, how did you know when you got to the conclusion that
right? That's a good question. I think there's just a resolution that there's a satisfaction that, okay, at least this chunk of this story is complete. Although I will say, when I handed off the first draft to an editor for the first time, which is another terrifying thing to do.
Yeah.
She was very wise in her counsel to me, realizing that I was a first-time author and had not a clue what I was doing. She came back and said, what you've written is good, and gave me all kinds of notes about it. But then she said, I think you might want to think about bringing in another point of view. Like, everything was written from a 12-year-old girl's point of view.
Okay.
And she said, I think sometimes we just need sort of a break from that, or another perspective. And she said, I don't know what it is. I can't tell you what it is. But I think if you ponder it, don't push it. But if it begins to flow, you'll know immediately that, oh, this is the point of view that we need. So at first I was a little put off and offended, frankly. Why would you think I needed that? But as I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe, but what would that other point of view be? I don't know. And then one day, as I was reading through it and doing the edits, I thought, what if there was a point of view that, instead of coming, like, this girl is on the planet in the earthly realm, but she gets to visit the other realm, a heavenly realm. What if there's a point of view that comes from the heavenly realm that gets to visit the earthly realm? What would that look like? What if there's an interaction of that? And so I began to write from a point of view of someone in her family who had passed away, who gets notification basically that, hey, she's been here. Your daughter actually has visited the heavenly realms. And so there's a back and forth interplay between her father, who has passed away, and her. Anyway, it's an interesting, but then I thought, well, there's this prayer that we as Christians have prayed for centuries: thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I think there's supposed to be an interplay between the heaven and the earth. And how do we know what it's like in heaven? How do we pull something down into the earth if we don't know what it is even? And so So that book is a sort of a big, long exposition on what if actually heaven and earth collided? What does that look like?
So when you took that back to your editor with this new lens, what was their response?
She said, "No, that's perfect."
There you go.
I don't know if perfect was the word, but
Yeah.
something that's what I heard.
Yeah. And how did you feel then? Did you feel like that
That
was
was
like
like,
a,
yeah, because it did feel like it brought a depth to the story that didn't exist previously. So, and it, yeah, definitely fleshed things out a little more, and it felt more complete.
so okay, a new author's listening to our conversation. They are single focused, like you were talking about from a 12-year-old's perspective within writing the book. What would you say to new authors about being open to having an editor speak to your book now that you see it in this light? What's the benefit of having different voices kind of direct you as you write?
Right. I think the big benefit is that you can write from a different perspective completely. So, it's like the old saying that, okay, there's an elephant in the room, but I'm only seeing its trunk and you're only seeing its ears or whatever. And
Yeah.
you can only describe what you are experiencing, but it's the same animal.
Mm-hmm.
But if I only listen to you, I would only know about an ear. And if you only listen to me, you'd only know about a trunk and you wouldn't really know the whole animal. And
Wow,
so
that's
getting
good.
another point of view helps you describe something more fully without going through all kinds of um, mental gymnastics to find another way to say something from somebody, like I can only see this part, but I could imagine what's on the other side. And so it seems to me that it would be like this or like that. But what if there's actually a person on the other side who can say, no, I actually know what it's like. And so let me tell you what I see. So I think that's the advantage of having several different points of view.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And now writing this book opened the door for more than as well for you. What came next for your writing career and how did that develop?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I didn't know if there would be another book. I I'm I don't know that I have super big ambitions of being a full-time author. But a lot of it was just, well, what else am I going to do? Okay, maybe this is something I could explore a little more. So the next book called The Agreements was a very different impetus to it in that I was at a conference, my husband and I together, and we were listening to a speaker who she said something about us having read the scroll or the book of our lives, that there's books written about our lives prior to us getting here,
Yeah.
and that we've actually read them and we've agreed to our lives.
Mm.
And I thought that was a very disturbing thought. I was not on board with that. It bothered me so much that I didn't really hear anything else she had to say. And it wouldn't leave me alone for quite some time. And so I felt like that same sort of nudging of, well, why don't you process this? Why don't you write a book? See what happens. So the agreements is another big long exposition of me processing this theological conundrum of, is that true? Well, I know in Psalm 139 it does say that all the days ordained for me were written before one of them came to be.
Right.
Okay, so I guess I can accept the proposition that my life was written before I got here, but that I saw it and agreed to it, that's going to take some thinking about. So,
Right.
yeah, that's where that one started.
You think of like some of the loss we experience in our lives, some of the challenges, some of the physical challenges, emotional challenges, things that come across our path that we're like, why is this happening to me? Why me? But the thought that we would actually agree to this ahead of time, that we would walk this path and experience the things that are going to come to us, and we signed off on this seems
Right.
absurd in a way that I would agree to having like a terminal disease or losing somebody special to me or whatever struggle is in our life, that we would agree to that. That just seems that's
Right.
An interesting concept to think that that's what we've agreed to. I love it.
Right. And the only thing that really started to settle me, I don't know that I'm still completely settled in it, honestly, but the thing that began to settle it in me was in in the Bible, it says that Jesus agreed to the cross um, for the joy that was set before him. And it also says that he was crucified before the foundations of the earth. Makes no sense to me. But what it does tickle in my intellect is to say, okay, he agreed to something prior to getting here. He knew it was coming. He came anyway because he had seen the end from the beginning. He had actually seen what was on the other side of the cross. And on the other side of the cross was freedom and redemption and resurrection and life and all the things that were gained through his death, burial, and resurrection.
Right.
So he said, you know what? I'll do it. I'll do it because I know what's on the other side of it. So then the next logical thinking for me was, okay, so what if we're more like him than we know? We are made in his image, true. That's what he says. And so what if our image is also, what if our souls have a capacity to say, okay, I can see the end from the beginning. I can see the loss. I can see the pain. I can see the challenges. But I can also, if I can see the end and know me going through that will result in this other thing that will be good and redemptive and restorative and breakthrough for somebody else.
Yeah.
Then you know what? I'll do it. I don't know. Like I'm saying, David, I'm not completely settled on it. Like, okay, so then did somebody actually agree to be Judas then? Like, because we needed a Judas.
Yeah.
We needed a Judas or there wouldn't have been a cross. So somebody had to agree to betray him. Who does that? And who says, all right, pick me. Yeah. I'll sign up to be the betrayer. I don't know. But also then it opens up a whole nother line of thinking of like, well, maybe on the other side of that, there's something deeper and more profound than what I've given myself permission to think about. So I don't know.
I love that you wrestle with that even to this day, because again, yeah, there's people who lead a path that destroys others. And how does that work? I don't understand why that person's here and why their life had to be because of all the people that were hurt in the process. I don't understand why there's room for them, but there's a give and take of evil and good and finding our place in this world. That's an interesting concept. Wow.
Yeah. So this book took me a while to write in that I'd get to a place where I knew something really difficult. I'd have to write about something really difficult. And I just wouldn't for a while. Like, okay, not going to go there. I'm just going to leave that alone for a while. And so it was a hard book to write because I was wrestling with some of those. And a lot of it is all about human suffering. Like, why do we suffer?
Yeah. That's
the big question that I think throws a lot of people off our game as far as faith and belief in God, because there's that ongoing question of why would a good God allow so much pain and suffering into our existence? If he could do anything immediately to get rid of it all, why do we continue to go through this? I don't have all the answers to that either, but this was one of my attempts to go through that. In the book, there's a place where it also has a heavenly perspective and an earthly perspective, and there's a angelic being whose job it is to facilitate the signing of documents for human beings who are coming to the planet. And he says, okay, you got to read through your skull. Here's your documents. You need to sign off on those. And he does that the very first time where a couple of twin girls who are going to be born in New York City right around the year 2000. And he goes through all the gyrations of being an agreement facilitator. And then he gets a glimpse. He says, I think I'm going to read that scroll. What did they agree to? And he actually reads through the scroll without being able to see the end from the beginning, but being able to see what they agreed to go through. And he's shocked. And he says to the designer, why would you require that of them? And why would they agree to it? And the designer of all things says, well, why don't you go down to the planet and find out? And so he gets to follow them, these girls, through their earthly lives, at least through a segment of it, not through their whole lives, but through segments of it that are pretty rough and pretty hard. And but he begins to see the depth and the breadth and the width that is the human spirit when in conjunction with the calling and design on their lives, and how profound that is. But he goes back and forth into the heavenly places to sort of debrief and like, okay, we just went through that. Why, how, why, what? I don't get it. And in one of these debriefings, he is taken to a very, very, very large, acres and acres large library in the heavenly realms. And his mentor, instructor, he says, what is this place? And she tells him, well, this is the library that records everything that was accomplished through the cross. So every argument, every pain, every disease, every suffering, every harsh word, every sin that humanity has ever committed, and every sorrow that's ever been experienced is all written in these books of all the individual lives of billions of people, and what was taken on the cross that Jesus took on the cross and for our sake, died as the sacrificial lamb. So he's looking at this thinking, well, and he asked the question, well, then if he took it all, why do they continue to suffer? Which is a big question. So I don't think I wrote for several months when I got to that part of the story, because I said, I don't have an answer to that. What am I supposed to say to that? I don't know. It bothers me greatly too. So finally, one day, as I just wrestle with these things, and I felt like the Holy Spirit said, you continue to suffer because you don't know who you are. And so I said, what does that mean? And I felt like it was, look, if every person on the planet understood to the core of their being who they really were, like who we are as sons and daughters of the living God, and what he's actually placed inside of us, and how beloved we are, and how precious we are. Like if every human being got a hold of that, human suffering would be eradicated. We would no longer harm one another because we'd be secure in who we are. And I think things like cancers and diseases, that I think they'd be resolved in ways because there'd be so much intellectual space freed up from all of the wrestling we do just with one another, that we'd actually focus our attentions on what matters. And I think a lot of those things would be, we'd find the cures, we'd find the answers, because there'd be a purity of thought and understanding and wisdom that flows when we are completely free of all insecurity and lack of understanding of who we are as children of God.
Are you a professional wrestler? Because you're wrestling with these things that are like, this is, again, between these first two ones that we've talked about, these first two books, like you're dealing with some pretty heady topics that are deep, and this is not a surface conversation here that we're having. This is like some pretty deep things that people would debate for years and years and years. I love the fact that you were open to be like, well, I'll write about it. I don't know what the end is, but I'll write about it. I love that you're open to do that.
Well, I think it's cheaper than therapy for me. Well, in some ways, it's actually very expensive too. It's a lot of time and effort and emotional energy. But I don't know. It's the way just the way that I process with God, I guess, helps me. And I will tell you that my books, my goal is maybe to not answer everybody's questions, certainly not. But if you just start asking, maybe if we just start asking some different questions, I'm okay with that being the end result of people reading my books too, is maybe just stir something up in you that opens up possibilities that you just hadn't thought of before. And that, I think, at least for me, I would get stuck in my thinking and my traditions and I think I understand this, or I think I understand that. And then I'd realize, maybe it's just getting older. You realize, you know what? I don't know jack squat. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about anything, actually. And I only know because I only find answers when I go to the throne of God and say, you know what, I need mercy and grace to help in time of need. And I'm in that place a lot. So
I love the fact that you're not saying to us as an audience and readers that I'm Wendy, I know it all. Come sit with me, I'll explain the magics of the universe. No, you're just like,
No.
I don't even know what I'm writing. I have no idea what's going to happen next. Like, I don't even want to write this next part of this book. I got to take a break. Like that's refreshing to hear that, because when we look at a finished book on the shelf, we're thinking, oh, this person has it all together. They knew the end before the beginning as they started writing the book, and they're right. But the truth of just, this is how I wrote it, and this is how it kind of unfolded for me. You're on the same journey as an author that we're on as a reader.
Yes.
Right? We're discovering it as we read. You're discovering it as you write.
Yeah.
It's a unique thing, I think, that we really need to highlight as an author. You don't have to have everything all figured out. You can kind of work it and develop it as it goes.
Yeah. And that's actually the joy of writing for me is, I kind of envy people who have the whole plot line figured out and have outlines and all that. I'm like, wow, that sounds really organized and a lot more comfortable than the way I write. But I also know that some of my favorite authors, when I read their writing process, they say, look, if your writing doesn't surprise you, it's not going to surprise anybody else either. Like, you need to allow your writing to write itself in some ways, because otherwise your stuff becomes so predictable that it's going to bore your audience. It was certainly going to bore you in the process. And so I'm not bored when I write. That's for sure. I'm sort of on a edge of a cliff all the time. So it's not boring, terrifying, but not boring. So yeah, it's not about being a know-it-all in any way, shape, or form. It's me actually processing the hard things in life. And hopefully with a little bit of joy and delight thrown in the middle of it too, So my books they're not heavy. And in fact, the first one, I've had so many people say, this is so winsome. And they kept using this word winsome. Like, do people even still use that word? It's kind of old fashioned, but when I go back and read, I'm like, no, there's a winsomeness to this story which means it's just sort of captivating in a way it is not sophisticated or complicated. It just sort of speaks to the child in us that needs someone to comfort him.
Yeah, it's not like that sign when you go to the amusement park and you have to be this tall to ride this ride. That's not how your book is. You don't have to meet a certain requirement to enjoy this book. That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that's book 2. We did talk about, you have more going on as well?
Well, I just finished book number 3
a
few months ago, Soul Wagon. And of course, another journey that's actually just me processing my life. But the protagonist of this story is about 65 years old, a woman who has raised her children, and it's set like right towards the end of the pandemic. It's 2022. We're kind of coming out of the end of this, but nobody really knows, all of that angst that we've been through and the world turning upside down. And the whole thought process behind Soul Wagon is about the generations, and maybe just my age, but you start to realize, generations are very precious. And I think that we are way more connected. Like you just had a new grandbaby.
That's right.
Born into the world. And it opens up whole new possibilities and understanding of what the impact of my life and what am I leaving and legacy, and how do I impart that to another generation who is brand new on the planet, who knows nothing. And so I asking all those questions of myself, wrestling with that. As my dad just passed away a few months ago. I started writing long before he passed away, but that's coming. That, okay, the older generation is actually leaving, and I'm going to be the oldest generation.
Right,
and that's a little shocking to the system. But I was pondering, there's the Carrie Job song, I think Elevation Church, called The Blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you. It's all scriptural stuff, but it's a very powerful blessing song over the generations. And I would just sit in that for long periods of time. And the Lord would say, I want you to imagine previous generations who are no longer on the planet, who are in the heavenly realm. I want you to imagine them singing this over you, which is a very powerful thing to do. So for me, I have the privilege of imagining people that I knew, parents and grandparents who I knew to be people of faith and who I knew would bless me, I knew who loved me. But then some days he would say, I don't want you to think about those people at all. I want you to think about the Queen Esthers or the Mary Magdalens or the people that you've been grafted into their line of inheritance through Christ. He says, we've been grafted into that tree. So they actually are our genealogy in a spiritual sense. I want you to think about King David singing over you, or, some of these heroes of the Bible that are ours, that are our family in Christ. And so it would wreck me, I would just, when you think about how, like you don't even know, this brand new baby comes to the planet, has done nothing for you, has given you nothing, and yet I can imagine the love that you have for this child and the blessing that you want to impart to her just flow from the very core of your being, right, as a grandfather. Well, I think that's the heart of God towards us, and I think it's the heart of generations who passed before us who are looking at us. It says in the Bible that we have a great cloud of witnesses that are surrounding us, and if they're witnessing, then what are they doing? Are they just watching and eating popcorn, or are they actually like cheering us on? Are they? So I began to think of them as cheering us on and rooting for us to, because it's pretty miraculous actually that faith has been passed on from generation to generation to generation without interruption, like for centuries. And I began to count the generations. This is an interesting fun fact for the day. If you go biblically and look back at all the generations since Adam, there's less than 200.
Right.
Yeah. Somewhere between 150 and 180, depending on how you count generations.
Yeah.
Which I thought, hey, that's not that many.
No.
I'm not that far removed from Adam and Eve, really. And so we're all so interconnected, way more than I think we give ourselves credit for. So, and then as I was thinking about the blessings, I thought about the verses that say, that there are curses that are visited on the third and fourth generations. I think in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy says that the curses are visited on the third and fourth generation. And I don't know, what stream of faith you're in or not, but I've heard a lot about the curses of generations and how breaking them off and doing that. And that's fine and good and probably needs to happen. But the verse after that says, but he visits blessings to the 1,000th generation. For those who choose life, there's blessings to 1,000 generations. So, being the great mathematician that I am, I thought, well, 3 or 4, I think 1,000 has a big greater than sign over the 3 or 4. So why do we spend so much time thinking about the curses of 3 or 4 when we have access to blessings that come through 1,000 generations? And if we've only lived on the planet less than 200 generations, then we've got a long ways to go before 1,000 generational blessings are going to run out. So that was that's my big theological thought through all this. So, but the storyline is much simpler than that. But so this woman, her name is Torah, she is pondering, what am I doing with my life? And my family's kind of a mess. And this whole pandemic has ripped us apart because we can't agree about anything anymore. And she gets a phone call from a cousin who lives way up north in Minnesota, where her grandparents built a homestead when they immigrated from Norway years ago. And the homestead has been ransacked. Someone has burglarized it. And this is very autobiographical. I have a family homestead in northern Minnesota from my Norwegian immigrant parents, and it was ransacked. So that was true. So we had to go clean it up. So I let my protagonist go up and say, you know what, I'm not doing anything else. I might as well go clean up this mess. So she goes way up north, and she begins to sort through all the stuff that is left in a home that's been continually inhabited for 100+ years. And as she touches documents and looks at pictures and puts things back, she begins to have dreams at night about some of these previous generations. And so she gets the privilege of sort of peeking back into who these people were and what were the things that they did or didn't do in life, and what were the conflicts in their families, and what were some of the giftings that she has in her own life, but she doesn't know where they come from, and she doesn't really see the value in them. And then realizing, oh, actually, this has been handed down to me from generations and generations, and perhaps I should see it as precious. And so she has that storyline. And then there's a very mysterious stranger who moves in across the road, who is there to help shore up an old house. And he's like a handyman who's been hired, but he has a very mysterious background. And I won't give away all of the plot line there, but as they interact, there's a lot of generational comings and goings that happen. And I think what settled me when I finally finished this book is that I feel like the Lord is saying to me, Wendy Jo, just settle in the ripples of the choices that you're making. Like, it's not all about the big things in life. It's actually about your everyday choices that send ripples across generations and into eternity that you really are never going to see, like, fully.
Right.
But you just need to trust that there actually are ripples, that there actually is impact, and there is, things that are going to really affect the generations that are coming up behind you, if you'll just trust. Just choose life, choose good, choose love, choose kindness, choose those things that you know to be good and right and just and fair, and trust that they're actually going to impact way beyond any scope of understanding that you have, perhaps this side of eternity. So
amazing. Solbakken, what's the translation for that? What does that mean?
Oh yeah, it actually means Sun Hill in Norwegian.
Yeah.
And it is the name of the original homestead that my great grandparents built when they came over. Northern Minnesota, to call it a hill is a bit of a stretch, because I think it was maybe a slight elevation. That's where they built their home. There's not a lot of elevation where they built, but that was the name. It's the place where my grandparents got married, at Solbakken.
Nice.
So it has a great deal of family meaning for me. So I thought I'm gonna include that. It's the name of the town that she goes to when she's. Town is kind of a stretch too. It's a pretty small place, but yeah.
Amazing. Wendy Jo, I love just listening to how you've approached all three of these projects, all uniquely different. They all stand on their own, and there's just your approach to writing for someone who is, even to write book number one and not have multiple books behind you, to approach a project like that. That's quite daunting to sit there and look at an empty page and go, okay, now where are we going with this? I just love how you've approached all these different things, and kind of how you ask a lot of great questions through your writing, and you don't have all the answers. It's not here to, I'm not here to give you all the answers to life, but here's a few questions I'm wrestling with as an author, and I'm just going to write this in front of you, and we're going to use the title of my podcast, Live That Next Chapter, as we kind of live it out loud, right? And as we write it. So as we close off, is there any other insight, kind of based on our conversation, that you think an author could benefit from your perspective as they approach writing? If they're going to be writing something this week, they're going to be working on their book, what kind of things would you like to put in front of them as a kind of a motivation for their writing this week?
Well, I think perhaps to just trust the power of story. That story. I know a lot of people are nonfiction writers, which is great too, but I think there's something about fiction that sort of surpasses or circumvents our prefrontal cortex, as it were, and goes around to the back of our brains, where's the source of emotion and memory and those things, and story goes to those places, and perhaps opens up possibilities in those places that we would edit out if it was just a straight nonfiction. This is how you process that you agreed to your scroll prior to getting here, and blah blah blah. Like we go, no, I don't want to read that. That's too hard. But a story allows us to go places that we might not choose to go in just a straight intellectual capacity. So to just trust that whatever it is, that the story that you've been given, to just let it go and let it be the voice that is you. It doesn't need to be anybody else except you, because you're the one it's been given to you to write. So trust that you're the perfect vessel through which it should flow.
Nice. And as you're explaining the different parts of our mind and how we write with those parts, it's kind of like, as you're talking, the term that came to me was kind of like an author's mullet, which sounds really weird to say out loud, but where it's business up front and party in the back, kind of the thing is kind of that for writing, where we're thinking with the front of our brains, it's all analytical, it's very thoughtful, it's well planned out. But then there's this whole party thing where the hair's a little longer at the back, and we can go back there and get some real creative insights into our writing. So maybe balance it a little bit as an author, and don't be so frontal all the time. Think back here as well.
And I would say, I've run into quite a few authors who are writing memoirs out of their old, out of their story, out of their lives, which I get and is good. And I think it's not a bad thing to do at all. But I also think you have to be so careful when you're writing memoirs, because you're dealing with liability issues actually, and slander and those kinds of things. And you have to be careful of how you portray the actual real life people in your life who perhaps have perpetuated trauma and abuse on you. And so I was reading up on an attorney who deals with this kind of stuff, and he had all of these disclaimers and things you should look out for and ways to handle it. But at the very bottom, the very last paragraph would said, honestly, if you really want to write about this stuff in the way that it actually happened with great freedom, make it fiction, change the name, change the date, change the setting, and you can write whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, that's how I write. I'm not going to worry about defaming anyone or slander. I'm like, no, I'm just going to make it all up with an element of truth in there out of my own life. So
amazing. Wendy Jo, how do we connect with you? Where do we find you? Where are the books available? What do we do now?
The books are available, of course, on Amazon, paperback, ebook. I have two of them out now in audiobook. Baby Catcher Gate and Soul Bakken. I just released Soul Bakken on audio. The audiobooks are available wherever you can find audiobooks, not just Audible. So you could check it out from a library if you wanted to.
Nice.
And the other books are also available through bookstores, Barnes and Noble. And I have a website that's just wendyjocerna.com. Just my name, Cerna with a C. And you can find all my stuff there as well.
Awesome. Wendy Jo, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Great conversation. Thank you for your acknowledgement of my new granddaughter. That makes me very happy to hear somebody say that out loud. And it's a great reminder that, oh yeah, I have a granddaughter. So thank you for including that in our conversation as well. Is there something else coming in the future? Is there another book? Is there book 4? What's happening?
Oh, David, I don't know. I mean, this is the way I describe it. I've had 3 children. After each one, someone would say, "Are you going to have another?" And I'd say, "Don't talk to me about that right now. I'm not even going to think about it." So I am not saying that it's not coming, but right now I'm just sort of taking a breath and a breather, because you can see for me that writing is not just an easy breezy sort of thing. It takes me places, and it takes a lot of focus and energy. And I also have to have something to write about. Like I don't know. I sort of just have to wait till something percolates and comes to or bothers me enough that I need to process it. So
it was completely a selfish reason why I'm asking that question, because I want to have you back. That's the reason why.
All right. Well, I'll let you know.
Okay. So keep me in mind, and I know the audience would love to hear you again on the podcast. So as the opportunity comes and something new lands in front of you, I would love to have you back in the future. So the door's always open. Please come back.
Oh, I would love that. I appreciate it, David. It's been an honor, and it's been fun. Thanks.
It's a great conversation. Everyone, please go support Wendy Jo. When you buy the book, if you buy it online, please leave a well-written review, and always 5 stars, because there's only one way to review a book, and that's 5 stars. but leave a very thoughtful review of the book as well. That will encourage others to follow you and purchase the books. So thank you, Wendy Jo, for being part of the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Really appreciate you being here and being part of our podcast community. livingthenextchapter.com is our website. I have an offer for you as an author, if you're listening, and you're wanting to build your website for your book. I've had so many authors come on and they're struggling in this area. I'd love to help you. All of the websites that I built for my different podcasts, I have experience and I'd love to help you and get you up and running. I can help you with your domain purchase. I can help you with setting up your podcast, making it really simple. And if you love Canva, we can even set it up on Canva for you, and you can do all your own maintenance. You don't need to hire anybody. We'll help you get set up. So if that interests you as an author and you want a website for your book, let me know. We can do this. I can help you. livingthenextchapter.com is the website for the podcast. You can find me there. I'd love to help you. Reach out. Let me know if I can be of assistance in any way. And thank you again for listening to Living the Next Chapter. Today is where your book begins. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening.